Chapter 9. The Bombing Range. There were a number of words not usually used in polite conversation within the flock. These were almost without exception terms relating to the shameful uses to which people put the chicken and its product, the egg. Verbs like to roast, to grill, or to fricassee. Nouns like giblets, liver, and the disgusting omelette. Adjectives such as fried, scrambled, baked, poached, and Scotch. All these came under the general heading of foul language and were only made use of very occasionally at times of stress. So the family's first reaction to Massey Harris's words was one of raised combs and embarrassed side glances, but in a moment the three brainy sisters looked at each other and their beaks fell open in surprise as the same thought struck them simultaneously. Hard, they said hesitantly, and then compelling themselves. Hard boiled? Wouldn't that mean, in the case of eggs, well, finish up sort of not as breakable as usual? They paused and looked at their mother. Cluck, cluck, said Spillers testily. Do we really have to discuss the revolting things that go on in people's kitchens? But do you know the answer, mother? Chipped in the boldest of the young cockerels. I mean, he went on, blushing to the roots of his comb or mottles, how do they hard-boil an egg? Apparently, replied Spillers, with an expression of extreme distaste on her face. The egg is placed in some kind of pot full of water and then is put on a fire or some sort of heat source, and, she hesitated, boiled. She shuddered for a long time. So the egg gets very hard, said the young cockerel. I believe so, replied his mother. My old Granny Goodyear once told me something about all this awful sort of business. She was very inquisitive and thick-skinned as a pullet, and used to sit on the apple branch outside the kitchen window and watch. No one spoke for a very long time. They all sat shaking their heads and scratching meditatively at the sides of their faces, while they thought about what had been said. At last Massey Harris spoke. Well, that's a very fine and large, he said. And I see what the girls are getting at. Hard eggs would make good missiles. But as for all this business of pots of water and fires, well, that's got me got me puzzled. It was Spillers, as usual, with her hard common sense, who put her claw on the nub of the problem. Look, she said, let's not try to fly before we can flap, as Mother used to say. We've got the beginnings of an idea, a good idea, a revolutionary idea, that is to use the girls as a spearhead, for I'm sure that everyone else will have a part to play when the plan is complete, of an attack upon the Longnoses. All we know so far is that one of them chanced to lay in flight, and that egg chanced to hit a longnose. So now we've got to wait until first they're all in full lay, and second they're able to prove to be able to lay in flight. And when that's happened, we must arrange for them to have masses of practice and to get into really good training. By that time, by the grace of Chanticleer, someone may have had a brainwave about the problem of hardening the eggs. There was a murmur of agreement, and the family flew off about their day's business. Within a few days, Ransom, Sims, and Jeffries were all able to report that they had all laid, and by the end of the week they were laying daily. At first they'd had difficulty controlling the timing of the egg-laying, and would drop one when and where the urge came upon them. To begin with, even on the bare earth of the farmyard. Farmer was always grateful for this early random laying of pullets, for it saved him the usual laborious climb up his tallest ladder to the high nesting places. But gradually they became more expert in discharging an egg at a time of their choosing, and one morning they came to their parents to say that they had not yet laid that day's egg, and were ready to attempt a lay in flight. Spillers and Massey Harris had already decided on the duck pond as a practice bombing range, for a number of reasons. First, it was unattended, for the foxes had long since exterminated the ducks. Second, it was the right distance, 100 yards from a suitable take-off spot, the roof of the Dutch barn, which provided both height for diving attack and a fine vantage point for observing accuracy of aim. Third, the adult birds considered this important. Its use meant that the practice eggs would sink out of sight and reach, so that neither would the sisters be upset, nor vermin encouraged by the sight of smashed eggs splattered all over the place, as would have happened on a solid target. And fourth, common sense told them it was hardly likely to contain large numbers of submerged foxes. Lastly, by happy chance, an old discarded tire from a tractor had at some time floated out to a point 3/4 of the way down the length of the pond, and there had become anchored in a small cluster of rushes, providing the perfect bullseye. The three sisters had chosen their time carefully. They had made certain their 9 brothers were out foraging, and had picked a moment when their mother and father were together on the Dutch barn roof. "All right," said Massie Harris. "Who's going first?" "I don't think I can hold it much longer," giggled Jeffries, agitatedly, and launching herself, she slid down the curve of the roof, and gently picking up speed until at the edge spread her powerful wings and began to glide towards the duck pond. Her direction was perfect, but her airspeed slow, and for one reason or another she released her cargo too early. "Egg gone!" they heard her gasp as she flattened out and skimmed the surface of the water. They saw the egg turning over end in the air and the splash in the near part of the pond. The parents cried, "Short!" Simms began to slide down the roof, profiting from what she had seen, giving half a dozen strong wing beats as soon as she was clear of the edge before settling into a glide. She released her egg from a slightly higher altitude than her sister, and perhaps 6 feet above the pond's surface, but still the telltale splash was no more than a third of the way down the long rectangle of green scummy water. "Can you hang on a minute, dear?" said Spillers to Ransom. "Yes, I'm okay, Mum," said Ransom. "I think I know what you're going to say. The others weren't going fast enough, were they? I mean, their eggs were not only dropping short, they were falling too slowly. I could see them turning over and over, when to my mind they ought to be going like lightning." "Exactly," said Spillers. "Don't glide at all, Ransom, darling. When you get off the edge of the roof, point yourself at the target and fly like blazes. Don't release until the last possible moment." "Right," said Ransom. "Here we go," and she proceeded to follow her mother's instructions to the letter. As she pulled up into a steep climb at the far end, after a run down the pond at a wood pigeon speed, the observer saw her egg drill into the water, not 6 feet from the target. "Oh, that's more like it," shouted Massie Harris. "Couldn't have done better, that is to say, couldn't have been done better, could it, my dear?" "Yes, it could," replied Spiller shortly. "It could have been a direct hit. Direct hits are what we need, and we'll get them soon, you'll see." The near miss had been close enough, however, for the resulting splash to wet the old tire and to throw up into relief the lettering on the muddy wall. As Ransom, after a controlled stall at the top of her climb, dived down and glided back over the target, she read on it the name Goodyear. "Gosh," she thought, "great Granny's name. Perhaps it's a lucky sign. She was a pretty hard-boiled old bird."